elementals, part of what is known as the little folk in olden times, the fairies, the elves, the sylphs, the gnomes. Well, they're still around today, but we just can't see them. They're hidden away from us unless we have the spiritual eyes that can see these other beings. Rudolf Steiner talks about them a lot in his lectures and says about how they've helped with the development of this planet, and they help with the development of all the other beings on this earth. He says, for example, that in the solid earth there is an element that lives. So in the solid earth element, the spiritual beings of an elemental kind who are very much more clever than human beings. So the earth elementals are clever little so-and-sos, but they're working obviously with the earth. And he says, even a person of extreme astuteness intellectually is no match for these beings who as supersensible entities live in the realm of solid earth. So they are supersensible entities, and he talks a lot about the supersensible world, that the supersensible world is living with the world that we're living in. Everything's got a supersensible entity to it. You know, the sun in the sky has a supersensible entity in it that sends down in its rays sun entities to work with us. And the moon in the sky has the same, is sending down lunar entities to work with us. But he says also that many of these entities, they live in multitudes. There's lots of them. They kind of don't have the ego individuality that we have. And he says the same about the animals and the birds. And this is why we see birds that flock together, because they're all living off the same one consciousness, one soul field, where we've got individualities. This is why the birds all can. You've probably gone and seen all these birds doing their wonderful flying around together, and never seem to miss a beat. And he talks about the fire elementals, and I've often watched a candle burning and love to see their little sparks coming off, and this is the fire elementals coming free from the fire and going out into the world to work. He talks about the elemental beings dwelling in the fluid element, water, having particularly developed what is in man his life of feeling and sensitivity, and we've always associated water with emotions. And he says that in this respect, we humans are really backward compared with these beings. We may take pleasure in a red rose or feel enchanted when trees unfold their foliage, but these beings go with the fluid which as sap rises in the rose bush and participate in the redness of the blossoms. In an intimate way they share feelingly in the world processes. We remain outside of things with our sensitivity, whereas they are right inside the process themselves and share in them. And I wonder if this is why, as humans, we don't interact with nature like we should. Many people are quite switched off from nature. Steiner talks about the elemental beings of air, that they have developed to a high degree what lives in the human will. It is splendid that the analytical chemist discovers the atomic weight of hydrogen, oxygen and nitrogen, and that he finds out how hydrogen and oxygen combine into water to be further analysed, or also how chloride of time is analysed and so on. But elemental spiritual beings are active behind all this, and it is essential that man should acquire insight into their characteristics. So what he's saying here is that all these chemical developments and combinations are different elements of the different elementals of the different elements, like the hydrogen elementals would work with the oxygen elementals to make the water, which creates a water elemental. And he says, during the period in which man developed the intellect, this was from the first third of the 15th century to the end of the 19th century, these elemental beings were pushed to one side, as it were. While the intellect played a creative part in man's cultural life, there was not much they could do. And because the elemental beings dwelling in solids had in a certain sense to hold back and leave the intellect to man, they also held back the beings of water and air. So all the elementals kind of receded from our view, because we're beginning to see with, a materialistic way, and not with our spiritual eyes anymore. And Steiner writes, "But now we live at a time when the intellect has begun to decline within the civilized world. It is falling into decadence. If mankind does not become receptive to what streams towards him from the spiritual world, then the result of this dullness on man's part will be, and there are signs already of it happening, that these elemental beings will gather together to form a kind of union and place themselves under the leadership of the supreme intellectual power, Ahriman." So what he's saying here is, if we don't work with the elemental beings, and they're neglected, they will find somebody else to work under, which is Ahriman, the dark forces. When what we should be doing is working with the elementals. And he writes, "If it should happen that the elemental beings come under the guidance of Ahriman with the clear intention of opposing human evolution, then mankind would be unable to make further progress. The possibility would arise that the Ahrimanic powers, in union with the elemental beings, would divert the earth from its intended course. The earth would not continue, as what is described in my occult science. It would not continue along on its Saturn, Sun, Moon, Earth evolution." And Steiner writes about how all the planets are evolving. The whole universe is evolving. And I know that in this day and age, scientists like to think, we know what's happening, we know everything now. Well, we don't, because we don't really understand how the cosmos works, or they don't really understand how the cosmos works. But the mystics such as Gurdjieff and Steiner and such like could see the real runnings of the universe and how the cosmos is an ongoing machine, not even a machinery, an ongoing assembly of other beings and entities that are also evolving all the time. And as I've said in other shows, I'm pretty sure that we're coming to a change in humanity's evolution. We're at a pivotal point of going forwards, evolution, or backwards, devolution. But to evolve, we need to be able to work with the elementals. Because Steiner says there's elementals in everything. And, if any of you read Terry Pratchett's Discworld books, he talks about how little elementals make all the mechanical objects work. Like a camera, inside there's a little imp. Every time a picture's taken, a little imp quickly paints the picture inside the camera, and that's how they get the picture. Well, in a way, that is what's happening, though. There isn't an actual physical little imp that we can see, but there is an elemental of some kind working in everything. There's an elemental in coal, which helps the steam trains move along in the olden days. There's an elementals in electricity that makes everything that we work with. Our computers, should thank the little elementals inside them for helping your computers work. And sometimes when your computers are playing up, or I found myself when my laptop's playing up, I just have a little chat with the elemental inside it, and usually that sorts it out. As well as the old switching it on and off again. But sometimes they just need a bit of recognition for the work that they're doing. And Steiner says, if these beings are disregarded by man, if he does not turn to spiritual knowledge and the insight that what exists up in the sky is not merely the physical sun, but that with the sun's warmth and light etheric beings stream down to earth, if man's comprehension stops at the external material aspect, then the possibility exists that these beings will unite with Ahrimanic powers. In order for the earth to become what it was originally intended to become, man must wake up to the dangers that threaten from both sides. On the one hand, the danger that those beings who dwell in the lower elements will join forces with Ahrimanic powers, and on the other, that the Ahrimanic powers will unite with those of the higher elements in their striving for unity. So he's talking about, for us to develop, we need to have our spiritual eyes and, follow the spiritual science, not just the materialistic science, the secular science. In olden days, science and religion worked together. And Steiner writes, the significance of spiritual knowledge for man's earthly destiny cannot be emphasized too strongly. Unless man draws near to spiritual reality, something completely different from what ought to happen will happen to the earth. And this is what I've been concerned about. All these people that keep telling me the light will always win. Not necessarily. If humanity doesn't get on the right bandwagon, if humanity stays in a materialistic point of view, it won't evolve, and the earth will suffer with it as well, or from that de-evolvement, that going backwards. For the earth to evolve, we need to follow a certain way of going forward. We need to follow the laws, the cosmic laws. And Steiner writes, no matter how far or how deeply our sophisticated sciences of physics and chemistry investigate the material world around us, the fact remains that what is investigated will all disappear along with Earth existence itself. In the last resort, chemistry and physics have no value whatever beyond the Earth. When the evolution of the Earth comes to an end, all mineral substance will turn to dust and dissolve in the cosmos. That's us as well, humanity. Everything on this planet will dissolve to dust. And I'll continue with what he says. Only what pertains to the plant, animal and human world will pass over to the Jupiter existence, but that is only if we develop. Therefore, all the magnificent achievements of these sciences are related only to what is transitory. It is essential that knowledge is attained of that which endures beyond the earth. As already mentioned, whatever physical laws are discovered, whatever is investigated concerning the atomic weight of individual elements, or whatever chemical formulae are produced, all these things are concerned only with what is merely transient significance. Man must grow beyond earth existence through knowledge of the kind of things I've explained, as the kind of things Steiner has explained. And he talks about all this in the lecture. You can find them on the Rudolf Steiner archive, and this one, they give them all numbers, letters and numbers, GA and then the numbers. And this one is GA212, the elemental world and the future of mankind. And I wanted to do this show because I'm quite concerned about the elemental being ignored. I don't want them all going to Araman. I want us humans to work with them so that we all evolve. All the elementals, all of humanity evolve upwards and onwards to the next stage of this whole cosmic process, which is quite exciting. So thank you for watching, thank you for listening, and until next time, peace.